You may remember Russell Weston Jr. as the man accused of storming the U.S. Capitol last summer, killing 2 police officers. At the time, no one knew how deranged he was. But now we have a videotaped interview with Weston. It is a rare look into the tortured mind of a psychotic killer. This trial may make legal history. Any day now, a federal judge will decide whether the government can force Weston to take antipsychotic medication against his will. Prosecutors hope the medication will make Weston competent for trial. Psychiatrists say Weston is among the worst paranoid schizophrenics they have ever seen. The videotape that you are about to see is a portrait of a man at the end of a long journey into madness. This is Russell Weston. He describes himself as a brilliant scientist, and sometimes, he says, people confuse him with God.
Hi, Mr. Weston. My name is Dr. Resnick.
This interview was done in a prison hospital 6 months after the Capitol murders. Weston is being interviewed by a psychiatrist who wants to know if Weston understands the trial he faces. Weston says that he's on a crusade to wipe out cannibalism in America, and he explains how he kills the cannibals.
I usually boil them in sour crude oil, is usually what I do.
Boil who in sour crude oil?
The cannibals. Which here in Washington, D.C., it amounts between 40 and 50,000 cannibals. I will put them in sour crude oil that's boiling hot, and whenever they get done, they turn out to be hard as a rock.
And what happens to them after that?
Well, they're usually deceased. Usually then I put a rope on them and I hang them up around Washington, D.C., and all of the rest of the people who see these blackened corpses all over town know that cannibalism will not be tolerated.
The madness of Russell Weston exploded into violence last year on July 24th.
There was just rapid gunfire, one right after another, just pop, 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 really, really quickly in succession.
At the Capitol, Officer Jacob Chestnut, a father of 5, was standing guard at a metal detector. Witnesses say Weston pushed a gun into Chestnut's face and fired.
All of a sudden, I just started hearing screaming, and then one of the guards kept telling everybody to run.
A few steps down the hall, Weston shot Detective John Gibson, an 18-year veteran with 3 children. Gibson managed to fire back, hitting Weston 3 times and taking him down. The terror was broadcast to the nation. Weston's parents were watching.
We are so sorry about what our son has done. We would never in our wildest dreams have thought he would have shot anyone. And we are so sorry for their families and the children he left.
The attack was a national tragedy. It seemed a senseless assault with no motive behind the mayhem. But in the mind of Russell Weston, there was a motive. Weston explained to a government psychiatrist that on that day he was trying to reach what he calls the great safe of the United States Senate. Inside, Weston expected to find the controls of a time machine that he calls the Ruby satellite system. Weston explained that he invented the system for NASA, but that in recent years the government had been abusing the time machine, and if he didn't seize control immediately, the Earth would be destroyed. Weston says the time machine gives him immortality because of a feature he calls the time reverse sweep.
When I become deceased, then that computerized system will kick in a program. That program will time reverse sweep me away. And when it sweeps me away, it will reverse me back to a point where I am no longer deceased.
Okay.
It will time reverse me back to the point where I am no longer deceased, and then that same system will act as like a transporter system, and it will put me right into the Ruby satellite system control.
When we watch Russell Weston on that tape, what are we seeing?
We're seeing someone with a brain disorder. Okay, schizophrenia is not about hard knocks growing up or about bad mothering. It's a brain disorder that renders him unable to separate fact from fiction.
Xavier Amador is a psychologist and a leading authority on schizophrenia. He was instrumental in the defense of another infamous schizophrenic, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. What is it like to be Russell Weston?
It is, at times, probably incredibly exciting. His delusions are such that he feels really important. He has some grandiose delusions. And at other times, incredibly frightening. This is somebody who believes that there have been implantations in his teeth that are controlling him, that satellites are controlling him and other people, that his life is in danger.
Shortly after the shootings, we talked to Weston's parents, Russell and Arba Jo. They said their son feared even them.
He thought that we were trying to kill him with the explosives in his television box that, you know, we get from our microwave cable. And his mother, you know, we tried to explain to him that none of that was true, but he was scared to death that somebody was trying to kill him.
Weston grew up in rural Illinois, a C student with a talent for fixing machines. 13 years ago, at the age of 29, he was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. He was in and out of mental hospitals. Usually, he refused to take his medication. Like most schizophrenics, he was not considered dangerous because he'd never hurt anyone. As a young man, he traveled to Montana and lived isolated in a cabin. Ironically, he was only 40 miles from Ted Kaczynski's shack. He never met the Unabomber, but when Kaczynski was arrested, Weston watched the coverage day and night, and his paranoia deepened.
You just don't know what happened, you know, what went wrong, when did it go wrong, why. You just ask 1,000 questions and there's no answer to it.
His delusions began to focus more and more on the U.S. government. In fact, the U.S. Secret Service interviewed Weston twice because he told them that President Clinton had sent a Navy commando to Illinois in order to kill him. Then, in 1996, Weston bought a new suit, told his parents goodbye, and drove from Illinois to Langley, Virginia, where he walked into the headquarters of the CIA and announced that he was there to apply for a job as the assistant director.
My name is Rusty Weston. That's my name. Rusty Weston. I am a clone.
A CIA agent interviewed Weston. That's Weston on the left. The interview occurred 2 years before the Capitol shootings.
But by the way, you're also sworn to extreme secrecy on this too. By you knowing this story, most likely you will end up dying for it.
The CIA apparently considered Weston harmless and sent him on his way. Weston is refusing to take his medication. The question now is whether drugs can make him competent to stand trial. Just listen to what he says about the judge in the case, Emmett Sullivan.
I have found that Judge Sullivan was involved with black market racketeering, and murder and cannibalism also.
That Judge Sullivan personally engaged in racketeering,
Yes,
cannibalism, and murder.
yes.
All right. And if that were true, how would that affect your trial in particular?
I am seeking to expose that conduct and to thwart them from continuing in that conduct.
Can he stand trial? Can he understand what's going on around him?
The competency standard in our country, both at the federal and state level, and this is a federal case, is really actually pretty low. You basically have to be able to tell the difference between a judge and a grapefruit. I mean, you really just need to know some factual things. You need to be able to consult with your attorney.
And according to Amador, Weston has another problem. He doesn't believe that he's sick.
He's like about 50 to 60% of all people with schizophrenia. My research and other people's research show that these people have a syndrome called anosognosia. You see it in neurological disorders. So about half of all people with this illness have this anosognosia syndrome. They don't understand they're ill.
Listen to how Weston reacts when he's asked if he would plead insanity on his lawyer's recommendation.
If theoretically A.J. and Barry did recommend an insanity defense, would you go along with it?
No,
Why not?
that is not advantageous to my position.
Okay. First of all, do you perceive yourself as being mentally ill?
No,
All right. Is that the primary reason that you'd reject an insanity defense?
that is correct, yes.
Prosecutors want to force Weston to take antipsychotic medication. The government says there's a 70 to 75% chance that Weston will become competent. The prosecutors couldn't talk to us because the case is pending, but David Shirtler is a former federal prosecutor who headed up the Washington Homicide Division, the same division that's prosecuting Weston. What does it mean to involuntarily medicate him? Are you talking about strapping him down and putting an IV in his arm?
Yes, involuntary medication in its most extreme form would involve restraining somebody, strapping them down, and forcibly, either through intravenous medication or through injections, providing them the medication that they need.
What will happen if you're found not competent to stand trial?
Then usually I get sent off to an institution someplace.
And what happens to you there?
Well, I stay there and they drug the heck out of me until they figure that I'm ready to stand trial.
And does anything happen to you besides being drugged?
I've been murdered a few times. I've been murdered and cannibalized a few times.
Murdered and cannibalized while
Yes.
in the hospital?
Yes.
So you don't see that as a very good outcome?
Well, it's one of the, in other words, it's one of the possibilities.
It's not likely that the medication will help all that much. It may restore him to legal competency, but he's still delusional and he still has anosognosia. And think about that for a minute. He doesn't want to pursue a mental illness defense and not guilty by reason of insanity defense because he has anosognosia. He doesn't know that he's ill.
If he stands trial, he faces the possibility of the death penalty. Rusty Weston has long feared that the government was out to kill him, and for the first time in his life, he may be right. There is a sense that what the prosecution is saying is let's medicate him so we can make him better, so we can kill him.
That's not the case. That's not what the prosecutors are doing here. They're taking the case in a logical, step-by-step way. And the first step in that process is to determine whether this guy can even stand trial, whether he's competent to stand trial. Until you decide that, there's no reason to even make the decision on whether you seek the death penalty or not. In past cases where mental capacity, mental illness has been an issue, they have chosen not to go death penalty.
And when death is imposed, what will happen?
I will be, in other words, given the death sentence. In other words, I will be made to die.
All right, and then?
And then after that, whenever I die, I only die for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, maybe not even that long. In other words, as soon as I die, then I end up in what I call the Great Safe of the U.S. Senate is what it's called, which is the Ruby satellite control.
Does Russell Weston know he's in trouble?
No, he doesn't understand that he's in trouble. He doesn't. You really, if you go inside his head, he is on safe ground. This is a belief he's held for well over a decade, that he can control time.
If it goes to a trial and that's what it is, and, you know, that they say that he murdered people, that he wasn't mentally incompetent, we will accept whatever the jury comes.
However heartbreaking it is,
yeah.
We will have to accept that because he did kill these 2 people. We know that the best that in this whole situation that we can even hope for is that he will be in a mental institution the rest of his life. That'd be the best that we could even hope for.